Hey squad, welcome back to the channel. As the title suggests, I have a very cool and interesting attachment I want to show you guys, and one that I also think you should own. This attachment being the winter trigger for the M1 Garand semi-automatic rifle. I've read and seen a few videos covering these, but I feel like most people aren't that familiar with them, which is a shame as they're really neat and have an interesting history to them. Plus, as an added bonus, they're super inexpensive, and as of posting this video, they can be found for $5 to $15 online. Now before I explain the purpose of the winter trigger, some quick history behind it, and how to install it, I want to show you guys it in action. Also real quick, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe as 30-06 ain't cheap and my M1 is hungry. Plus it also motivates me to keep making content. Thanks guys. Alright, now that you've seen the winter trigger in action, you can probably guess the purpose of it, but if you couldn't, its purpose is to make it easier for soldiers to fire the M1 Garand while wearing gloves. Which might seem weird to me and you, but during the 1950s when the winter trigger was created, US troops fighting or stationed in cold climates were issued the M1949 Arctic mittens, which as you can see didn't include a finger slot for your index finger, aka your trigger finger. Which means if you wanted to shoot your M1 Garand, you'd have to take off your mittens, exposing your hand to the elements. Even with modern 5-finger gloves, it's still a bit of a pain to get your finger in the trigger guard and on the trigger itself. What the winter trigger does is allow you to bypass the trigger guard altogether and essentially moves the trigger down to the grip, allowing you to fire the rifle while still wearing mittens. Which is awesome, but also to be honest, a bit dangerous. The trigger guard was invented for a reason, and with the winter trigger, all it takes is one guy tripping or grabbing the stock by accident, and you'll have a negligent discharge on your hands. But to be honest, as long as you exercise caution and a little bit of common sense, these are perfectly safe to use. Now I mentioned the M1 Garand winter trigger was made in the 1950s, which means it didn't see use during World War II, but let's dive into the history surrounding it, specifically about the creator and why he made it. The M1 Garand winter trigger was created by John Polomsky, a US Marine and Purple Heart recipient that served during the Korean War. After surviving the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, also known as one of the coldest battles of the Korean War, with the temperature dropping to -38 Fahrenheit, he realized the need of being able to fire the M1 Garand without having to take off your mittens. I want you to think about that for a second. A Marine during the Battle of Chosin Reservoir not only had to survive waves of attacking North Korean and Chinese troops, but also the cold elements. During this battle, and probably many others during the Korean War, the Marines wrote about how their rifle lube oil would freeze, Jeep and truck batteries would die in the cold, rendering them useless, and even morphine syrettes froze, leading to medics having to thaw them in their mouths to make them usable. During the battle, frostbite caused more casualties than enemy fire. Seeing how big of an issue frostbite was, and how the Marines needed a way to fire the M1 without exposing themselves to the elements, specifically the cold, John created the M1 winter trigger, most likely saving many US troops from frostbite. Unrelated, but I did have to mention it, but the M1 carbine, BAR, and even the M14 all had winter triggers created for them as well. Though the M14 one was, well, pretty dumb in my opinion, since it had to be screwed onto the stock, leaving it vulnerable to cracks. Alright, now that the history is out of the way of the winter trigger, I'll show you guys how to take the winter trigger off and explain how to install it. It's fairly easy, as you can see. Simply make sure your rifle is empty, then flip it over. Once upside down, use a stick or anything really. In my case, I'm using a padded bike lock as I don't want to scratch my M1, and then stick it into the trigger guard. Once in, simply pull the trigger guard up, away, out from the rifle, and it should pop right out. Now for context, my trigger guard is the milled version, which is, a later version of the M1 Garand trigger guard, which means we are going to use this little adapter piece to attach it. Once on, simply pop the trigger guard back in place and you're good to go. If you have an early production version of the M1 Garand trigger guard, which means the milled version, you wouldn't use the little rectangle adapter piece that I showed earlier. You would just plug it into the hole on your trigger guard. It's super simple, I can't show it here because I don't have one, but again, there's a bunch of videos online. As I mentioned earlier, this is a really cool attachment for your M1 Garand, especially for you guys that like to shoot year-round like me. Plus, they're still inexpensive, unlike most surplus attachments you see nowadays. If you order one online, most likely it'll be an original one made for the US military and covered in cosmoline like the one that I got here. Nothing a little warm water and dish soap can't remove. Cosmoline is super easy to take off, don't sweat it guys. They also make reproduction versions, but you might as well just get the original while you can. But anyways guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more military surplus content, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. And also check out my Instagram, which will be linked down below. I got a couple of upcoming videos that I'm pretty excited about. An M16A1 parts kit, some French camouflage I want to show off, and a couple other items. But thanks for watching.